What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back to talk about another UDFA signing for the Detroit Lions this offseason. And today, we are talking about the 2020 Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year, Tavante Beckett. So let's get it started.
Way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, and we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Yeah! He's the GOAT! Oh, there's nobody! Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're talking about a guy that definitely accomplished something extremely impressive last season, being named the Defensive Player of the Year for Conference USA. Another name of note, someone that also did this in Conference USA, is Trey Hendrickson back in 2016. I thought I would just bring it up because, there were the rumors this offseason Lions could sign Trey Hendrickson. He's the defensive end from the New Orleans Saints. So there was those rumors. Of course, Dan Campbell was there, Aaron Glenn was there. I just thought I would throw that out there, that he won this same award, and we know Trey Hendrickson has been a beast in the NFL, so hopefully the same thing happens here with Tavante Beckett with the Detroit Lions. But the nickname that I've come up with for Beckett, and I know it's not that original, it's probably not the best nickname, but it's Mini JOK. Now you're probably thinking, wait, Mini JOK. The whole knock on JOK in the draft was his size, that he was undersized. You're trying to figure out what role can we use him for, and it's probably a big reason why he slipped on the draft boards, because he's not built like your typical linebacker. You're like, what role can I use for JOK? But Tavante Beckett's even smaller. He's smaller than JOK in height and weight. So I'm calling him Mini JOK, Mini Jeremiah. No, bad nickname? It's probably a bad nickname. But either way, he won Defensive Player of the Year, so he made it work. And statistically last season, he was outstanding, and we'll get into his pro day numbers, things like that. But I do want to throw this quick background note in there for Tavante Beckett. He did not start with Marshall. He actually started with Virginia Tech. But unfortunately, with Virginia Tech, things went sideways very quickly. A felony charge that was dropped, but that was dropped. He had like 100 hours of community service. He ultimately was indefinitely suspended from the Virginia Tech football program, so he transferred to Marshall, and it was definitely a learning experience for him. It was early in his career. He's definitely learned since then. I haven't heard anything like that since then. We're not really talking about Virginia Tech time because it was so early in his career and it was kind of a mess. I specifically just watched Marshall film. Stats first. So this is a 5'10", 214-pound linebacker. Now, we can be generous. I'm always cool with being generous. Some people have labeled it 5'11", 220, 217 in that range. So, you know what? If we want to do that, it's cool. I'm down with doing that. Be a little generous. Throw a couple more pounds on there, Give him some chicken wings to put in his pockets. Big boots. Whatever you got to do to make him a little bit taller. So we can be generous. I'm cool with that. But regardless, he's a smaller linebacker, right? It's clear he's a smaller linebacker, and that's a big question. And that's probably a huge reason why he went undrafted. Not the only reason. There were other reasons, but it's probably a big reason to that because, he was outstanding last season, but you're still trying to figure out as a team, just like they were with JOK, where do we use this guy defensively? What is his role going to be? And even more for him, because there's certain things that they didn't do with him in Marshall, which I wish they would have more to just see where he was in those areas. So they're going to be question marks for an NFL team. There was too many questions here for NFL teams to confidently use a draft pick on him because they're not exactly sure what role he can fit. But as a UDFA signing, you get to see him, you get to work out with him, and you can see what he can actually do, and you get to answer some of those questions. So we'll get to those questions in a second, but I want to start off with these statistics first. Last season, his Defensive Player of the Year award season, 2019 was actually arguably better statistically. He had like 120 total tackles. But last season, he had 90 total tackles. 31 of those were solo tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and he had tons of tackles for loss. I don't know the exact number here. I couldn't find it, but I know it's a lot. Guy makes plays in the backfield. So I don't know the exact number, but I know he's a playmaker in the backfield. Now, when you watch Tavante Beckett, I feel like with a lot of the UDFA signings the Lions have made defensively, they all have a lot of similarities. Okay, there's a couple of things that they all have in common. Length. The way they play, they kind of play with a little bit of an edge to their game, and they're also very smart players that may play much faster than their 40 times and their cone drills and may tell. And that's exactly what's going on here with Tavante Beckett. So at his size, you watch him on film, he looks fast, and you're saying to yourself, okay, his pro day numbers will come back very strong, they'll come back very good, and that can definitely help his draft stock, and hopefully it means someone will take a chance on him. But actually the opposite happened. His pro day numbers came back, and a lot of the speed drills, they were not good. And because of that, that's another reason, adding with the size, that I think that he went undrafted, because you were expecting these to be better than they were. Now, the arm length was great. Over 33-inch arms for a guy that's 5'10", 5'11" is crazy. There's offensive tackles that didn't have that long arm length. I think Rashawn Slater or Penei Sewell has shorter arms than that with their official measurements. So just think about that for a second. The guy has extremely long arms, okay? And that's something something that Brad Holmes loves. But when you get into some of these pro day numbers, 4.73 40 time. At his size, you'd expect that to be much better. So that's a little bit concerning. JOK didn't do all these drills, but he worked out a tons of different positions. You knew he was fast. Get Tavante Beckett, you were expecting good numbers, and it just didn't come out that way. He had a 1.7 10-yard split, which is not very good. I think last year's linebacker class, there wasn't a single linebacker with that slow of a 10-yard split, which is just crazy. I mean, considering his size, it's absolutely nuts. His 3-cone drill was 7.36 seconds. He did, however, have 18 bench press reps, which is really good considering his size. Pair that with his length, and you got some things you can build on. But then his vertical jump was only 31 inches. That's not good either. The explosive numbers weren't there. The speed numbers weren't there. The agility numbers weren't there. But it shows up on film. You were expecting those to be better. When I looked up his pro day numbers after watching the film, I expected to see some really nice numbers here. And I see that, and I'm like, dang, that definitely is going to hurt your draft stock. Now, obviously, you know, it's a weird year, all these pro day numbers. There's going to be a few questions that the Detroit Lions, having them with the Detroit Lions right now, they're going to have to ask themselves, and we'll get into that in a second, but I think there's a few questions that they're going to have to try to answer with Tavante Beckett when they try to figure out what role we can play him in, because that's the biggest question with Beckett to me. It's not can he play, it's where can we play him? Specifically now knowing that we're going to be running a 3-4 style of a defense, even though there's a lot of styles of it, where on the field can we play Tavante Beckett? Can we use him as the extra defensive back? Can we play him like a safety? Can we play him like a corner? You know, what can we do with him? There were things that Jeremiah did with Notre Dame that you could see on film and say, okay, he can cover. But with Beckett, he didn't have that kind of role. So you still have a lot of questions. So these are things that they're going to have to figure out throughout the offseason and then decide whether or not he can be on the team, or if it's enough to build on heading into future years and at least give him a special teams role, because he can do that. But let's start off with this run defense first. Maybe the best part of his game as a run defender. Yes, and I know it's weird being undersized, but as a run defender, he is super fun to watch. You can see production has been there. He is all over the football. He sniffs things out very quickly, and he's all over the ball all the time. He just has a nose for the football. He's extremely explosive. When you watch him on the field, he's quick. And I think, you know, when you look at those pro day numbers, you may get concerned because they're not very good. I'm sure his RAS score is not good considering his height, his size, and then the slow numbers. It's probably awful. But when you watch him on field, he looks so much faster. And while that is concerning, it does kind of go back to what Dan Campbell brought up, is like, hey, trust the film and then go look at the numbers and see if there's something going on here, because obviously competition can make you look faster. But he didn't play awful competition. I mean, they didn't play awful competition. Everybody I watched him play against, teams that were ranked, I saw a guy that just looked fast. He just looked quick on the field. He looked explosive. And I think that kind of tells you a little bit of how smart he is as a football player, how quickly he reacts to things, how quickly he diagnoses plays, reads run plays, the film study that he puts behind it to make himself look fast on the field, faster than his numbers will tell you. He plays with tons of passion. What do I mean like that? I mean, this guy is a big hitter. He's not shying away from any sort of contact, even though he's undersized, whether that's taking on a blocker, a run, a ball carrier, whatever it may be. We're specifically talking about run defense here. The guy plays with a great motor, and he plays with tons of passion. I mean, he will literally lay you out to smack a ball carrier. So much to the point where it can lead to issues because he won't wrap up as much as he'll just try to just run you over. Okay, this guy will lay the boom if he's given the opportunity, and he attacks blockers when they're coming his direction. I mean, he wants to light up offensive linemen. Even though he's too small to do it, he wants to. And sometimes he gets the best of those guys because he just plays with so much heart. And he's a strong player. For his size, 18 bench press reps is very strong. He does a great job of avoiding blockers. He gets himself really low to the ground, makes himself small, which is kind of his benefit, right? I mean, when you're a linebacker, kind of like smaller running backs, they get really low, they're behind the offensive line, they can kind of hide and see the holes. Kind of the same thing that he does from the linebacker position. It does lead to issues because he can't see over the offensive line and, you know, pick out where the running back is. So he plays the opposite. He plays low, tries to fill the hole just like a running back would. And yes, at times you can get out of position like that, but he's a very smart player. He gets on top of runs very quickly. He sees where things are going, and he avoids blockers at such a high level because he's had so much practice trying to do it. He gets low, he bends, and he shows that quickness and agility to make offensive linemen miss. And like I said, he wants to avoid contact, but if he does get contact, he's going to fight through it the best that he can. And then the length side of it. The length allows an upside of disengagement here. The length that he has and possesses allows an upside of a guy that could disengage much better. The issue right now is that size-wise, he can get bullied. He can get washed out of a play by an offensive lineman. That's the problem right now, is that he can be completely taken out of the play once they latch onto him. So if you put on some more pounds, let's just say hypothetically he got a little bit bigger, then his length could show up even more because he already has that strength, and you could see him disengage to be able to kind of stack and shed much better. Run recognition is great though. I mean, this is like another one of those guys. It just looks like he spent so much time watching film. He's on top of things. He's quick to react. Very similar to what we talked about yesterday with D'Angelo Amos. Run lane diagnosis though is great. He can play either role. He can play a patient role where he waits on things and picks the right hole to attack through, or he can just attack lane. He's willing to just fly through and try to fill a lane right off the snap and blow up a play in the backfield. He can play both of those roles. He can race to the edge, so he can get out to the edge, set the edge very quickly. He can get to the spots. He can run sideline to sideline. Even though the 40 time doesn't say it, he gets there quickly because he seems to be ahead of everything. He really seems to be on top of plays, and he'll give you 100% effort every single down. I mean, there's no question he's going to have a very high motor all game long. I want to take a look at 2 plays here because I think this really sums up his kind of effort. So he's at the bottom screen here. Watch him avoid the tight end. Then he's just going to put his shoulder into the blocker and the ball carrier. His size may be a question, but he did not let it show up. He played with outstanding energy. Here he is on the goal line. I think this play is just awesome. All right, they just need a yard to get in. He may be undersized, but doesn't let that hold him back. Watch him just attack downhill. Boom! Lay his shoulder and halt the run. He is just a playmaker behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, he is a tackle for loss type of guy. This is the dude that will jump through holes just like a running back would, kind of guess where they're coming out, and he will blow things up in the backfield. And once he gets to the ball carrier, he's trying to knock you out. Now, you don't always see big hits, but you hear the pop every time. Sometimes he doesn't lay him out because he just doesn't have that kind of mass to him. You can't hear the pop. Our issues, there's clear issues as a run defender. As much as there is to love about his game, sideline to sideline, making plays in the backfield, big hitter, will attack blockers, can, avoid blockers, his run recognition, his run reads. There's also some major concerns, and it's mainly stemming from size here because he can be completely erased from plays. In a zone blocking scheme, if he can quickly kind of squirt his way to the backfield, he can blow things up. The issue is offensive linemen are so tall, it makes it difficult for him to see a runner. So he's trying to pick out holes, but his zone blocking scheme allows it for a running back to try to pick the holes. So for him, if he can shoot his way into the backfield and blow something up, you'll see those flash plays. But then at the same time, as much as you make it a flash play, you'll also see other plays where he's completely taken out of it. In a kind of gap blocking scheme, he can do a little bit better because he can avoid offensive linemen, right? He can avoid offensive linemen. He can kind of fill his gap knowing where he's got to get to. But again, if he's picked up, he can be erased from the play. It's really a lot on size here. I have the tendency to overrun plays avoiding blockers, trying to get out of the way of a blocker. This is a massive upside here as a guy that could stack and shed at the next level because he gets low, he attacks really strong, and then he has long arms to disengage. And we've seen multiple examples of it against bigger guys at his size. Is very impressive, but it's inconsistent right now because of his size. If you put on a little more weight, this guy could play a lot of different roles as a linebacker and really could do whatever you asked him to as a run defender. But it's really just that limitation in terms of size that leaves inconsistencies and, things to be desired. Hold his ground and then move a lineman out of the way like we've seen with some other bigger linebackers. Avoiding offensive linemen, he kind of has to squirt around them. But with that being said, he, at that point, will overrun plays because he tries to get by the offensive lineman, tries to get by to the backfield. Running back can pick a different hole. They can just get out of the way, and then he's taken out of the play because he'll overrun things trying to avoid offensive linemen. He does overrun sometimes as a tackler too. He gets very, very amped up. He can overrun things, doesn't always break down extremely well. He's a good tackler, just doesn't always break down extremely well. Like I said, sometimes he'll try to lay the big hit instead of just making the safe tackle. He will leave his feet sometimes. Every once in a while he'll get a little too high. Sometimes they just slip off him because he's just not that big, and he really has to wrap up well. He's a good tackler, don't get it twisted, but he does overrun some plays. And you'll notice those are similar things that we noticed with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah when we went through his film, not to the same level, but in a way, there were a lot of similar knocks against Jeremiah. He was a good flash player. He could explode some plays and make some jaw-dropping plays on the field, but at the same time, he could be erased, and he had a big issue of overrunning plays. He really overran plays. He was so fast, it almost took him out of his feet, but I think it's also avoiding, predicting. You get out of position, you overrun plays, and it's the same issue that we saw with JOK that I saw a little bit here with Tavante Beckett. So I think a mini JOK does work. I think that's a fine comparison. If you can keep him clean at the next level, he can be scary. I mean, he is scary for offenses, and he can just make some amazing jaw-dropping plays, and then he'll turn around and get taken out of a play. He just goes at it. He's attacking. He's a downhill linebacker that was in a Marshall defense that, at least in 2020, was about getting downhill and getting after it. So even if he was out of position, he was going to at least force the running back to go elsewhere because he would just attack like crazy. I mean, play after play after play, he's giving you 100%. So he would blow up some things. And because that, it led to flashes of big tackles for loss, big plays in the backfield, and he could to live in the backfield. But like I said, there's also those times where he would be completely taken out of the play and have no impact. Keep him clean at the linebacker spot, and he's able to just shoot down and play downhill, but I think it's what Dom Capers is going to implement, just like he did at Marshall in 2020. He can be disruptive, very, very disruptive if he's able to stay clean in the back end. Linebacker position that could fit him, especially if you bulked up a little bit, could be like the will linebacker position. You're kept more clean. It's kind of the position I think Alex Anzalone will play right away. If you know Alex, he's a big hitter, but he struggles a little bit with taking on blockers. It's the role that I think he'll play for the Lions. It's a role that Beckett could play down the road, especially bulks up a little bit. If he can drop into coverage, if he can prove that he can do that at the offseason, that's a role that down the road he could be fit for. Remember, Alex Anzalone is only on a one-year deal, right? So is Dylan Reese-Maven. So, maybe not for this season, but next year, years to come, if he's still here, he can start to develop in that kind of role. Pass rusher, he's, again, give me some JOK vibes because he was scary at times. I mean, Jeremiah would scare offenses because he could get to the backfield so fast that it was like as soon as you snapped it, the guy was there. Now, the issue with Jeremiah can consistently be able to happen because of his size. When he did get there, especially if he was clean, I mean, he could get there in a hurry. I mean, super fast, faster than other linebackers in this class. Kind of the same thing here with Tavante Beckett. He can be scary as a linebacker pass rusher. The thing, though, that he brings is that he's such willing to take on offensive linemen. He's such an attacking linebacker. He will take that contact. He's not shying away from it. Tavante Beckett will take on running backs, take on tight ends. The issue is he can get picked up because those guys are bigger than him, usually. He's just that on that small side for his position. Specifically, tight ends can pick him up. But he does play with that same quickness, same burst, same willingness to just say, I'm going after the quarterback, I'm getting back there. And it can lead to some disastrous plays and lead to some bad passes because he has that closing ability. He can shut down things from behind. He can run things down, kind of like playing the jack position, behind the play, the weak side. He can run things down from behind. So the pass rush, he can be scary. And then the length. The length should be an advantage for him. As much as I don't know if he used it as an advantage in college, it definitely could be going forward. Not only as a pass rusher, but also just getting your hands up and knocking passes down, but as a pass rusher to disengage from some blocks. As a pass rusher, he didn't display a lot of pass rushing moves. I saw like a swim move a couple of times, but there really wasn't a lot of pass rushing moves here. It was just sprint as fast as I could to the backfield, which makes sense. At his size, you trying to engage and then disengage, he knows it's not his strength, so he just like, okay, I'm going to get there as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to try to beat these offensive linemen, the tight ends, by getting to the backfield before they can pick me up. I mean, that was his goal. So there wasn't a lot of pass rushing moves. He could add more to that if he's going to be a more consistent pass rusher, but he gives you the upside as a pass rusher to be scary, and on certain plays, just completely wreck the play before anything can happen. Not going to consistently get to the backfield because his size is limited, his pass rushing moves are limited, and if he gets picked up, he can be washed out of the play. But he does bring that speed and aggressiveness that you want out of a pass rusher. Coverage, and here's where my biggest question to him, because when you see him in coverage, there's too many questions right now to maybe warrant a draft pick, because when you look at his size, you ask yourself, what role are we playing him in? Let's take a look at the Lions defense, for example, and we did a defensive scheme video on this. Let's say they're playing a 3-4 style of defense, right? You have 4 linebackers, you got 3 defensive linemen. Let's say at the jack role, they put Romeo Okwara there, right? They put Romeo at the jack role, Julian Okwara, someone like that. At the Mike linebacker position, we have Derek Barnes, like Dan Campbell told us. At the Will linebacker position, I'm going with Alex Anzalone because he's going to be free. He can drop into coverage. And at the strong linebacker position, you could put a guy like Jamie Collins because of his ability to take on tight ends. Then, of course, you have your defensive line. Where does he fit in there? Because these are bigger linebackers. At 3-4, usually you have bigger linebackers. You got guys that can fly. He can do that, but he's definitely on the smaller side. So you're asking yourself, where on that can he fit? To add a little bit as a jack linebacker. The good thing is, with Marshall, he played all the linebacker spots. But the next level, it's a different game, right? It's a different size. And that's what people are worried about, is what role do we play this guy? I think he could give something as a jack linebacker, playing things from behind, running things down, and just attacking, getting after it. The jack linebacker doesn't drop that often into coverage. They're usually just getting after the quarterback. And that could be something that he could do, especially if he could put on a little more weight, then he could work on some more pass rush moves. He's already got the strength and the length to disengage. That's a role that he could mix in. He could mix into some of those linebacker positions, maybe more in passing downs, but the issue then comes in the coverage. You don't know what you have here as a coverage linebacker, specifically in man-to-man coverage, because his role was so limited at Marshall. I don't know what we have in Tavante Beckett as a pass coverage guy. Then the next thing you would say was, okay, can he play as that extra defensive back, the extra cornerback, the extra safety, the extra linebacker that you put onto the field in, let's say, a 3-3-5 defense? Can he play like the rover role, where it's like a linebacker / safety? Can he do that? You want to say yes, because he can stop the run. He's more of a run-stopping nickel. But then the question is, can he drop into coverage? That is where the questions come in. So in coverage, he played zone coverage almost exclusively with Marshall. He just didn't have a huge role. He didn't drop extremely deep into coverage. It was usually very shallow drops, 5, maybe 7 yards. Didn't drop far out to the outside, maybe sometimes would take on flats. Actually, more in 2019, I saw him line up at the slot position and drop into zone coverage there. But he just wasn't tasked with a lot in coverage. Now, with his build, you want to say that, okay, he should be good as a coverage guy, but I'm just not completely sure. I think he could be. I just don't exactly know what we're getting here. And with the inexperience, the limited role that he's had, there's going to be hiccups, no question, as a coverage guy, because there's a lot that goes into it. Sometimes he gets too focused on the backfield and he doesn't cover guys as well and get on top of routes. He more focuses on the backfield and what's going on around him. So you saw him in zone coverage and he looked pretty solid there. I would say at his best, which is what most of his role was, from the linebacker spot in zone coverage, was underneath routes, short routes, slants, crossers, things like that. I mean, he could pick up on those routes and pass them off pretty well. So I like that. His length should help him big time in coverage. In zone, reaching out, knocking things away. In man, going against tight ends, longer receiver, because these guys most time are going to be bigger than him. His length should be big, especially at the point of attack. And then he can also flip his hips pretty well. He's got some agility there, and he's pretty light on his feet to stay balanced. The issue is the limited role. I almost never saw this guy line up in man-to-man coverage. Almost never. Because Marshall's like, hey, he's too small. Let's not do that. They didn't put him in that situation. It makes sense. But the next level, when you're asking yourself, what role can we put him in? If I'm trying to put him in as an extra nickel on the field, he's got to be able to cover for me. And that's the question you have. That's something that the Lions will have to decide as they go through training camp in the offseason. Can he do this? What can he bring to the table in coverage? I just simply don't know, because out of the 4 games I think about 4 full games of him, 3 last year and 1 in 2018, I just didn't see those man-to-man opportunities. I saw a very limited role in coverage, and even in zone, it wasn't deep drops. It was easy. It was short drops. It was 5-7 yards. It was just something like that. It was nothing crazy. And most of the time, he was the guy that was going after the quarterback, the pass rusher, the run stopper. So I don't know how much he can give you as that. And plus his size then against like tight ends. The NFL, I'd say the average tight end is probably 6'3", 6'4", the average tight end, maybe 6'5". I mean, he's 5'10", 5'11". That's a huge size differential. So his arm length helps him, but you have questions. Can he man up man-to-man a tight end? Can he tackle a tight end? Yes, he can tackle tight end in space. Just like Amos could, he can do the exact same thing. It's almost like a guy that would compete for a similar role like D'Angelo Amos in a way as that extra DB on the field. He is just more of a linebacker version, more of a run-stopping version than D'Angelo is. So he's like competing for the same role, but he's a different spot because of similar builds here. So that's the biggest question. So you have a couple things you can do to him. You can either try to maybe make him a little bit bigger, bulk him up more, allow him to be more of just a linebacker, not try to throw him into this extra DB role. Use him as a linebacker. Let him do what he does best. Let him run stop early down so he can be more effective early in his career, and try to, put a little weight on him. Maybe let him, play in the box a little bit more. That way he's not as erased as easy. He's got the length, he's got the power, he's got the willingness. If you can bulk him up a little bit, that could be his role. Or you can say to yourself, can he do this in coverage? You're confident what he can do in coverage, or at least what he can develop into. You can keep him around as a guy that could play like a rover type of role for the Detroit Lions, which is like a weird overhang role. You don't see it all the time, but in specific situations, you can see it. The thing is, his direct competition there will be a lot of these safeties, DBs that we brought in that can play very similar roles, like D'Angelo Amos. Very similar. And since he has that experience at coverage and doing a lot of those things in coverage, I just wonder what he can do there. I think he can do it. I just don't exactly know. And there's going to be limitations because you can't make him taller. So there's a couple options the Lions will have to decide with Tavante Beckett. The good thing is I think he's going to bring a special teams impact from the get-go. The guy, to me, if he made the team, can take that JRM, Jalen Reeves-Maybin role on special teams day one. Reeves-Maybin's probably going to play more defensively this year because I think he'll have a bigger role there with Lions a little bit lacking some depth at linebacker. So for Beckett, he could step in and take that special teams role. Smaller linebacker, just like Jalen Reeves-Maybin, but on special teams, he's a playmaker. Kick coverage, he is a playmaker. He will smack you. He laid some booms in special teams. So I know he can serve that impact day one, which gives him a role early. But down the road, you want to see him develop. So early, his role could be that. And then you Lions decide, what are we developing into? A linebacker, a pass rusher, or coverage guy? Like, what are we going to do with him? And once you figure that out, if you can bulk him up a little bit, he could be a guy that down the road could serve a big impact for this defense. But that's the biggest question for me, is trying to figure out what that role is, specifically in our 3-4 style of the defense. So Tavante Beckett, mini JOK. The guy is impressive. He will impress the heck out of you. I'm betting if someone has a highlight reel, it's going to be fun to watch because he has some flashes that are just outstanding. But the biggest question for him is, what role can and will he play? Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.